Right, guys, next rebellion is probably the quickest and easiest one of the lot so far, and this will take only a couple of minutes. In fact, the reason it's called a rebellion is a bit misleading, and you'll see why after you've heard about it now. So you've probably heard of Lady Jane Grey, the 9-day queen. So this is basically a failed attempt to put a new queen on rather than Queen Mary. So this was all about Lady Jane Grey, who, quite frankly, is used as like a pawn in a chess set by the Earl of Northumberland, John Dudley. So, sorry, the Duke of Northumberland. So, a little bit of background again. We know that Edward was very, very young when he comes to the throne, and he'd been ill for many years. But 1553, he was on death's door for most of it. Now, John Dudley, also known as the Duke of Northumberland, had been Lord Protector for 6 years. Initially, he had been Lord Protector with the Duke of Somerset, but think back to the last video I did, the Duke of Somerset had fallen after the Kent Rebellion because he got the blame for why they rioted. So John Dudley had been by Edward's side for 6 years, a very strong Protestant, just like Edward, and he got used to power. Now he realised that because Edward had no children, next in line was Mary. Now Mary was a devout Catholic, a very strong Catholic, and so Dudley knew that as soon as Mary became queen, he would lose all power and he'd become, a nobody again. So what he did in the final few weeks of Edward's life, Dudley drew up what was called a devise. Now, a devise is like an official document, and this removed Mary officially from the line of succession and also removed Elizabeth, Mary's half-sister. Remember, both were daughters of Henry VIII, out of the line of succession. Now, what it said in this devise that if Edward died without an heir, which he would because he was only a teenager and he had no children and he was on death's door, then the throne would be passed to Lady Jane Grey. Now, why Lady Jane Grey? The first thing was she was young, so she would require a Lord Protector, aka John Dudley could continue his job. B, she was a devout Protestant. Again, that would mean that she could use someone like Dudley. And finally, she was also his daughter-in-law. Okay, so it would all work out perfectly for John Dudley. Now, it's worth mentioning now that John Dudley was one of the best commanders in the whole country. So if anybody was going to try and pull this plan off, it might have been him. The problem was that although he was quite sneaky at the start, he underestimated just how many people would actually support Mary. Okay, even though the people had been used to a Protestant king for the last few years, they understood that by right and by the original law of succession, Mary should have been next. When Edward actually dies in July 1553, Dudley sends a small army straight away to arrest Mary, but Mary has thought on her feet very quickly and she flees. Now, because of that, Dudley is sort of isolated, and that's why Lady Jane Grey only lasts 9 years on the throne, because actually the problem is London does not back Dudley. The rest of England, along with London, they want continuity. They understand that since Henry VII, it stayed in the line of succession, and they don't want to change that. So even the Protestants who would have been anti-Catholic, they still would have shown support for Mary, because remember, the Tudors loved the idea of a strict social order. Okay, things happen for a reason. They don't want things to change too much, so they would have backed Mary, the vast majority. So that's why he lacks support. In the end, I put there that he realises he's stuffed. Dudley realises that this is not going to work, and on the 9th day, he proclaims that yes, Mary is queen, and that Lady Jane Grey was never queen. He tries to talk his way out of it. He gets arrested and he's executed. Lady Jane Grey probably wouldn't have been executed. She is arrested, but because another rebellion kicks off, which I'm going to tell you about in a minute, because Mary wants to marry Philip, it's best for Mary if Jane Grey is out of the picture. Because remember, once you're in power, you want anybody who could potentially take power out of the picture. So literally, that's it. There is more to it, but for the bare bones, that's basically it. There's a few documentaries, by the way, and the BBC make a really good one, she is actually a really interesting story, even though nothing really happens and nothing really kicks off. She was used. She comes across in other history books like somebody who was, wants to try and have power. She never ever wanted power and never asked for power. She was just used by her Lord Protector, or by Edward Lord Protector. Right, guys, as usual, any questions, let me know, but I will speak soon.